Okay, so today on the Creative Lens, Wade and I are going to be talking about courses. So both of us, Wade's recently just launched a course as part of an extension of what he does with his YouTube channel. So that's where we're going to kick off the conversation so people can get an insight into how courses get put together, what's involved, and how you potentially connect that, or ways you can connect that to your social media accounts to extend on what you're doing as a creative. So part of what we do is teach with our artistic endeavors. So Wade, tell us about your course you've just launched today, man.
Yeah, so I basically, because I teach in the sort of image creation sphere, whether that's through AI or Photoshop, it's primarily AI at the moment, but what I looked at the demand for the channel, and it's one of those things where my content was tailored to the analytics, and so I definitely zeroed in a bit more on Midjourney, which is a platform people use to generate images. And even though I still cover a range of topics, that's kind of like the one I prioritize. So I decided to put together a course for that because there's a lot more to it than people realize. There's a lot of things you can do with it. So I've been using it for 2 years, which is a long time in the world of AI image generation. So I thought I'm going to put everything I can into a course. And it's funny because I originally wanted to do this a while ago, but I hadn't really had any experience with the course. And I remember thinking, like, how the hell do you do this? It sounds like a massive task until we looked at putting your course together. And I started, that is your course, is in Ryan's course, not you, the listener. I haven't been spying on you making courses, just so you know, not for at least a few weeks anyway. And yeah, and I sort of started to see how courses were set up anyway. And I realized they're not that difficult. If you have the expertise, all you need to do is figure out how to convey that in a way and teach.
You know, I think that's one thing that I definitely experienced where you said you're talking about they're not that difficult. There was that barrier of like, okay, I'm doing something, and you're almost being like you're overanalyzing every single element of that course, because at the end of the day, like sometimes you just have to trust your own abilities a bit more. And like, that's very difficult for people to do, particularly with things. I'm sure everyone can relate to that when you're putting something out there, which is effectively like a tattoo. Like once it's done and it's out there. So how did you get through that? Or the other question I wanted to ask you was, like, aside from that one, is where did you start? Like, how did you begin laying this out to go, okay, did you start with your objectives of like, this is what I want the course to be able to, or the person who does the course to be able to do, and work back? Or tell me about your process?
Yeah. So obviously, my understanding of what is supposedly good for a course sort of developed before I started, obviously, which is a good thing. For me, I thought a course was like, you're just going to develop a bunch of skills and, basically be good at doing something. And actually it was, have you ever heard of Sunny Lenarduzzi? No, she's man. She's got a massive course community, and she talks about online business, things like that. I heard her say once that you're not looking to showcase every single piece of something. You're actually looking to create a transformation. And even though you could say, well, basically what I'm trying to do is create a level of understanding of how Midjourney and AI art works, and how you can combine the tools to get certain controls over what it is you're doing. So I looked at it as how you can take more control over Midjourney, or basically become a pro. So that is a similar definition to trying to learn how everything works, with the difference being that the end goal is to sort of go, well, how can I make someone have more control over what they create at higher quality, so therefore improve their understanding of the process, as opposed to just simply covering all the tools, which are some of the courses I've seen out there. That's kind of all they do, is they just basically cover the tools. So I try to work on teaching the tools first, and then using them to achieve a level of control so you can get a better result.
So that was your mission, like that's your mission statement at the beginning. Did you find, so when you're working back through that, designing like your chapters and your content, did you find you ran into any hurdles to do with that? Or you hit some points, you're like, okay, you got to think about your process and how you're going to deliver that tool and knowledge to the person doing your course?
Definitely. One of the hardest things I found was there are lessons you want to teach at the start to get people, to ease them into the skill set. And there are certain things I found that I wanted to be able to mention to help with the understanding. However, I couldn't teach that. It was more complex than the thing I was teaching, because I started simplest first, beginner, and I then put the pieces together over time in this course. So that way you can take your time and grow your skill set that way. But it doesn't hurt to be able to mention these things. So I started realizing there are things I should just not worry about mentioning, but then there are some things I figured I can mention them and just say we're going to go deeper into that later in the course, because people can always come back. That's the beauty of a course. You can come back and watch the videos, and if you already know this information, one thing I mentioned is if you're already somewhat intermediate or advanced and you buy this course, rewatch some of this stuff because there might be things you've missed, things like that. So get in the order. Yeah.
I get that with stuff like resources that I buy, because a lot of the time it's not you're not hearing any new information. You're just hearing a repackaging of the information, which is really interesting, particularly when it's creative. But one thing I want to ask you with this is with AI, and forgive my ignorance with the actual inner workings of what you do, but is there something where, because when you're teaching martial arts, for example, like this is there's movement patterns that have to be practiced and ingrained, right? With something like AI, and I know you prompt, is it a similar skill set in that regard, or is it something which there's less repetition to actually build? Like we're not working with motor skills like if you were drawing something, for example.
Yeah, no, definitely. I would say you could probably compare them. One thing my coach himself, he uses this a lot. I don't use it as much when I teach because I coach martial arts a couple times a week, but my coach uses this analogy that when you first write, you learn to write letters. And then once you have the letters, you can write words. And then once you have words, you can write sentences and paragraphs, stories, so on. But that's a great way to look at it in a very linear fashion. But I actually think the fact you chose martial arts as a metaphor for that is really good, because to give everyone a bit of an idea, I do Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, about 20 years, just shy of 20 years of training in both of those. And obviously in Muay Thai, we've got punches, kicks, knees, elbows, and clinch. And in Jiu-Jitsu, we've got grappling, and there's sections of that, but we'll just call that grappling for now. I would say, if you're looking at, say, prompt generation, I can teach you how to throw several different types of punches. And I feel like that is maybe you working out part of the prompt which describes the objects that you want to see in the image. Kicks is another area where you can learn. And I feel like now you want to describe how the scene is presented in regards to framing or lighting and things like that. And then there are other bits and pieces like the aspect ratio or the style of the image. It could be a painting, it could be a drawing, it could be a 3D render or a photo. So understanding how to describe all those elements individually is like learning each individual strike, and then putting combinations together is sort of like the total prompt where you're going, okay, I want to see a dog wearing sunglasses at the beach, but I want it to be a cinematic 3D render, and I want it to be darkly lit, and I want the colors to be, these colors. So yeah, learning the individual pieces and how to put them into a scene will help you get more control over an image in the prompt. So I sort of break that apart, put it back together a little bit in that course. But that's not the only way you can do it, but that's kind of like the methodology that I focus on. And then there's also other things beyond the prompt, like adjusting an image and things like that. Yeah. But that's kind of like the skill set spectrum, or the way you might walk them down the path.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because it's like you're teaching them to know something, but how to do it. So you're giving them like a tool to be able to execute a very certain goal, which is, I was just curious how that actually all clicked together from an AI perspective. But okay, so when you're spacing your course out, how many parts to your course are there when you're putting it together?
I think there's 7 or 8. There's an introductory and a conclusive one, which I wouldn't say are really parts, but this is one thing I got from you actually with your guitar course, is I actually looked at, okay, like what's the definition of what we're doing? What are you going to learn, and how should you use the course? I remember seeing that. I didn't actually read any of your content, by the way. I just saw that you had that in there. And I just thought, man, that's actually very smart, because it allows you to establish what the tool is we're using, therefore what you can use it for, what its limitations are, what we're going to learn from that, and then how to use it. So I would say one section is just even getting them mentally prepared for the course itself, and the final section is kind of congratulations. But in regard to the content itself, I would say there's probably, I think, 6 sections. And all I did was I tried to look at the levels of, the first section is how can I just use the tool to create images with a couple of really basic controls like the shape of the image and things like that. And then I looked at, okay, what's the next level? There's still a lot more tools to learn. They're just a bit more to understand. So I tried to go up in complexity in the tools. And then once you had all the tools, it was then combining them, going from there.
So you pretty much, you're identifying what the key fundamentals are to execute by the sounds of that. And then like teaching people, and then once they got that down, then you can put another layer on top. That's pretty much what we're doing here. Or?
Yeah, I the way I describe it in the course is like you're learning the tools. You then can combine the tools into processes, combine the processes into strategies, and then when you get your image at the end, give you some direction on how you can further develop that image beyond that with other tools. So it's kind of like, learning to throw punches and kicks at once. And then, like I said before, putting them together into combos. But then you're also going, well, how do I position myself in the ring and make strategies to use as combos? So it's kind of like you got the basic tools. Now you got the combos, which are like your processes of getting strikes in. And then you're like, when do I use them? How do I use them? How do I set them up? I feel like in martial arts, that's a way of looking at it. And in AI, it's like, how do I use the tools to get the image? How do I get these tools to work together to get an image that I want? And then how do I take it from there to make it work in the way that I need it to work? And it's hard to really say in a short, succinct way.
I love the fact like the title of this podcast is going to be something along the lines of like how like AI, art, and kickboxing have so much in common.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. I will say this. As someone who has done martial arts for a long time, I almost compare everything to it. Life itself, life's battles, Like, you have a tiff with the missus. It's like getting punched in the face.
There's a lot of analogies.
You can try and block the punch afterwards, but it won't work.
There's a lot of analogies because I think there's the consequences of fighting are quite obvious, because if you muck up, there's severe consequences. So if you run in with your hands down, you probably get rushed into something. You're probably getting clipped. So I think that's why it's like a really good analogy. Like it just translates so well to analogies. But to sort of swing it back to your course, man, the next thing I wanted to ask you was, so in terms of like your YouTube channel is very successful at this point. Like you've built up a really strong following, like a lot of people tuning into what you do. So there's obviously a really strong demand for it. How long did it take you from inception to, was there anything that surprised you in the process of putting this course together, from like identifying the demand, outlining it, executing it? Did you have issues with where to cut it off or what information to leave in, take out? Like just talk us through that.
Yeah. I guess I looked at, that's a good question, actually. In regard to the course itself, really getting an understanding, because like I said, when I saw your course, I realized that like each section has several lessons in it, and it can be text or video, and most of the time it's video. And because I was a YouTuber already, I was like, well, that plays right into my hands. I know how to create videos. But the difference was I wanted to slow them down and be more focused so people could stop and learn. But I would say the hardest part for me was not scrambling all over the place, was trying to work out what leads into what. And there was stuff I cut out because it might have been personal preference or very trivial. So I laid it all out. I put a bunch of dot points on paper, and then I was crossing things out. As I was making the videos, I'm like, there are so many videos in this course. And I thought, for starters, I thought that was good. It's in depth. But then I realized some videos are literally like 30-second segments. So it's like, you could do a full video where you really, kick the dead horse until it comes back to life. Or, you can actually go, well, they don't need that much information. They just need to understand the concept, because they'll put, if I show you how to build a wall with Lego, you can then build 4 walls. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need to show you how to go, and then we do the south wall, and then we do the north wall. Like,
yeah, I get
trying to,
I get that, man. But one thing I find interesting when you're teaching people skills, like when I'm teaching students the guitar, man, if not every student, and not any student, I'd like to rephrase that, man. You tell them something, and the first time you tell them, particularly when they're like the more green they are, like the fresher when they're just starting out, they're not going to hear something for the first time and just like take that on board and identify how important that is, even if you're stressing that. So I think that's one thing I try and do is there's certain reinforcements that you need to make constantly just to sort of, it's almost like you're trying to hold something in shape, if that makes sense, from a teaching perspective. And I know that from a teaching perspective, because at least 2 or 3 hours of my day is teaching. And it just happens that I enjoy doing it as a part to my other work on YouTube and all the other stuff I do with music. But I find that like it's very rare. Like in more advanced players, you can tell them and go, look, because they can identify problems in what they're doing. And you can go, look, this problem is caused by this. And then they can identify, the significance of that. But a beginner or someone who's less experienced, you sort of have to reinforce that. And I struggle with that with courses, because like you want to give people like the most effective, minimal information to do the tool. But again, you don't want your courses to be like John Danaher, where they're like 12 hours long, man. Like his jiu-jitsu courses are crazy, man. Like it's just like, man, do we have to do 12 hours on mount escapes? Like,
yeah, I don't need to know like how to position my pinky when I'm laying on the armbar. I need to make sure that I have a perfect 48.7 degree angle.
He's a genius, man. Don't get me wrong.
He's awesome.
I love him. I don't want to make it like I'm
parroting
shit on John Danaher, because I'm not. He's awesome.
Oh no, I'd love to train under him.
But
that's the thing. When watching a YouTube video or something, it's hard to follow him because it's so much detail. But if you were there with him, and it's funny you mentioned that, because this is something I forgot I did in the course. Was for starters, courses are great, and they're also by principle really bad in my opinion, because if all you do is watch a course and try to remember all the information, it's just not going to work. And that's even something I say at the very start, is make sure you stop. If you're having trouble carrying the information, stop and go put it into practice.
Yeah, let it sink in.
Yeah, and at the end of every section, I have a project or exercises. And the first one is literally experiment and have fun creating images, because that's all you've learnt to do. And you can come back and rewatch things. And, you can't learn anything super effectively without trying it. Like, really doing something is the key to learning, but you have to know what to do, at least in order to get your brain to absorb it. So, you need the reference material to come back to, and then do, and your brain goes, I've done this a million times now. I know how to do it. But it's not going to remember how to do it.
But even I notice that with because I practice a lot, man, with guitar. And I notice that I've learned that there's a digestion period. Like you can understand a skill, but there's a time for your body just to absorb it, where it's like, yeah, I know that. I can hit it. Okay. And then there's a period where it's just like an aha, where it's just like, I've got that. That's in the system, so to speak. It's in the subconscious and it just flows out. And I think it's tricky, man, because particularly when it's tough to teach beginners, it's not tough to teach them. It's tough for a beginner to understand that that's the process. Because I kind of lay all that out before, first thing with my fundamentals course is I laid all this out. Like, this is the process you need to follow, because this is how skills are acquired in my direct experience. And I'm sure there's enough neuroscience and cognitive psychology to back that up now. But just be prepared. This is it. It's not you watch a video, despite what movie you've seen, like montage you've seen out of The Karate Kid, and then all of a sudden, you've just got all this stuff just on tap in a week.
Not like The Matrix.
Nah, man, not quite. So yeah, you got to own your skills. But yeah, it's that's that challenge, isn't it, man? When you're just trying to convey the information, but it's also the process to implement that information is probably more important than the actual information itself.
It's funny. Something I mentioned was in the course too was try to practice as often as possible, if possible daily, if not just as much as you can, because if you don't use it, you'll lose it. Like one example, I had someone the other day I helped out with some design work, because I don't do a lot of it anymore, but I mean for close to 20 years. Actually, no, yeah, for 20 years. I was a graphic designer and web designer. I did it every day, all day, full time, until I had my own business, and that was full time. And that was my life for 20 years. It's only been 9 months since I stopped doing it full time, and I was fumbling the keys and doing the wrong stuff occasionally. I was getting the job done, still probably very well, but man, there was a massive difference between 9 months ago and what I'm doing now. And I know where everything is. I logically know where everything is. I know what to do. It's just that the instinct in my fingers and the just knowing exactly where to go on complete autopilot, it's actually weakened. Despite I've had 20 years experience, I just haven't done it every day for 9 months. So
yeah, that will come back really quick.
Yeah.
If you do it. But that's the thing. I think that's something people take for granted is skill sets. Skill sets aren't solid. Like if you don't, like it's like fitness. It's the same thing. Like if you don't run for 2 years, you're not going to be able to run how you used to or lift weights and play guitar. Same thing. So yeah, that's an interesting dance, isn't it?
I agree.
So the course is out, man. It's going really well.
Yeah. The first day launched, sold a bunch of them. I don't get too comfortable with sharing figures in public, but I mean, like it was more than I made in a week. It was almost more than I made in 2 weeks in my old job, almost. So, I think that's a pretty good start. It shows that that people are into it. So, but I mean, in saying that, it was also a lot of work up front. It's not like you just made it in one day. But actually, we talked a lot about my course, but you've got a course of your own, and I think it's interesting because I created mine in PayHip after we converted yours over to PayHip because it was super simple, and the fact that you could kind of start it for free. And it was a cheap monthly fee to host the videos. So you started with Teachable, which is a completely different platform and far more complex. I'm interested to hear your experience. Is there anything that stands out to you about the process of that course, whether it be the whole thing, like any part of that process that really caught your attention that was unexpected?
I'm not sure. I think one thing that I did with the first course, my fundamentals course, is I probably overproduced it. And what I mean by that was I really wanted to create something where because the course is set around, so I specifically wrote like 9 pieces of contemporary music because I've got a background in writing, composition, and production, like to teach very specific and individual skill sets that would take someone from a complete beginner through to intermediate. And I tried to present all of those like skill sets, try and hide them in pieces of music which people would find interesting in like contemporary genres like rock or metal or hip hop or pop or blues. So you can go through and you're getting practice in all these different genres, learning stuff which is hopefully a lot more appealing than just learning nursery rhymes, which is all the books that I did coming up were just like, here's a nursery rhyme with this, or like here's a old textbook with this, like the old Berkeley books. And it was just death on a stick and really boring. So the whole point of trying to teach things in context, but what I did was I tried to create the experience of the person learning with a live band. So creating all these compositions recorded in a studio with a live band. So the person is learning their things and they're playing along with a live band. So that actual feel, which was a lot more expensive than if I just did them in my computer. Like all the production costs of that course was like studio time, mixing, arrangements, hiring musicians. And that was, if I had my time again, I probably would have just done it at home in my home studio and just like sequence drum tracks. But it's just, it just took longer for the course to pay for itself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I feel like what you're saying too is very relatable to business in general, that when you start off, you want to do your best. So you bring out all the bells and whistles only to realize that what people are really there for, you got to try to find a way to trim it down to the most efficient version of that. Interesting. How did you find Teachable? Like, well, maybe not Teachable, but like, did you find it daunting to start with Teachable, or like compared to like say moving to PayHip? Or?
No, look, to be honest, the platform itself was fine. Like at the end of the day, PayHip was just offered the same what I was looking for or what we were looking for when we were, but just at a far more competitive price point. Like Teachable was starting to get to the point where it's like, gee, it was sort of starting to eat in a little bit more to profit margins than I was comfortable with, for example. And like the hosting, like it was just PayHip was just a better option for what we were doing, I think, and looking to do. So I think I found PayHip really. I still use PayHip, like even with the YouTube channel. Like if I have a lot of extra content that goes on from the videos, which I just want like some PDFs or some exercises or little sound tone patches for their units and things people can download from the lessons. Like PayHip's super simple. It just seemed to simplify the whole process, mate, and do it at a far more competitive price point. And I think it made hosting, it just connected up to the website a bit easier as well, which is sort of on your side of things. What is that?
I found that pretty straightforward. Yeah, no, that was good.
Because you're using PayHip now too, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've got a bunch of products I sell on there now, as well as the course. If I can learn how to talk properly.
Yeah.
So, if you had to start again, though, so if you had your time again, if your course disappeared, and you absolutely had to rebuild it. Obviously, you were saying you probably scale things down, but is there anything in your process mentally you look back and you think, yeah, I might change this or that? Anything?
No, I wouldn't change. I wouldn't change the course itself. I would have changed how I delivered the music side of things because it's just from a cost perspective. But the actual information in the course itself, I wouldn't change. I kind of underestimated. Funny story actually. I filmed the whole thing. I did a bulk film, so I just filmed the whole thing, right? So every single bit, and was just going to sit down and do like a massive editing session. So I wrote the course, recorded it, did all the lessons, sat down to film it, and because I spent so much time off of YouTube, I took a couple of months off YouTube. When I set up to film the actual course itself, man, I didn't line one of the cameras up properly because I just assumed everything was in its. I have a set and forget studio. One of the cameras had been bumped, so I get down to edit. I've just filmed my entire course, and I can't use it because one of the cameras isn't lined up properly.
Oh man.
Like that was like a real Zen moment for me. I'm just like, I might have had a few yells for like a minute and then I've just gone, okay, it's done. Let it go. You have to film it again.
It's just, mate, just head outside, find a random, give a nice big kick in the knees, go back inside. I'm just kidding.
Oh man, it was, I think I did it over the summer holidays, man. And it might have been, I'm just guessing, I can't remember exactly because I've probably repressed it. But it might have been 4 weeks of constant filming. Just down the toilet, man.
Man. 4 weeks.
Yeah, man.
That is insane.
Well, that's and just on such a basic fundamental thing that you just take for granted as part of your filming process in your studio. But it just, man, it's like, you guarantee, man, when I set up to do a video now, I check them cameras.
Part of the learning process.
Yeah.
Some knowledge is expensive knowledge.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I pay for it with time, but mate, we all make mistakes. But because that's the thing. It's because I'm currently doing another course at the moment based on improvisation. So using the processes I use to teach people how to improvise, and the thing I've probably taken, what we've spoken about before, is probably not trying to over deliver on too much information and just like strip it down where it's still a lot of information, but I've written the course out what I want it to deliver. And I'm finding that thing, even though you're looking at it like, is that enough information? But then when you actually get into the nuts and bolts of filling out, like, and filling in all your tools and processes and filming, production, all that sort of things, it starts to fill up really quick. And you're like, oof, this can get out of hand if I dig too deep into certain areas. And it's that dance between finding that right amount of information where people get the most use out of and not overloading the viewer or the student with too much.
Yeah, that's pretty good advice. I definitely feel there's probably a few videos in my course, especially since it's my first course. Every now and then I think about one or two in particular, and I think I'll redo those eventually, or at least tidy them up. So, it can be easy to get caught up with trying to tell everything you can, because it's one of those things where you want to put all that knowledge in people's heads, but they also, putting knowledge in people's heads isn't the same as learning it. They want to learn the knowledge, so you have to give them the seed a little bit, not so much the whole tree.
Well, the other thing too, man, is like when you get the course, like this is probably where you're more qualified to talk about. Okay, I remember, all right, I've got a course. I've sold a couple, which is great. How do you go about promoting it now? Because there's always that initial that initial stage where you're launching it, and you've because my audience on YouTube isn't as big as yours. I've got just ticked over 2,800 because I've had a pretty disrupted year, so I haven't been able to post as regularly as I had in the past. So it's getting that sort of. I wouldn't be pushing the same numbers that you are with it, but how do you go about promoting? What's the best? I think I know what you're going to say. It's to do with email lists and that, right?
Absolutely. So yeah, obviously, here's the thing. I can tell you the numbers of courses I sold based on a video I published on YouTube about it. However, I published it after I sent it out to my email subscribers, so the number might be skewed. But all the reading I've done over the years, everyone in business who has successful businesses goes on about email. So years ago, I started experimenting with it, and it made a difference for me. It's funny. You can promote on YouTube or a social media platform, but it can be difficult because people can forget about you. Whereas email, they're constantly getting emails in their inbox, especially if, as we've discussed in the past, you're delivering value. So I would say you do need an audience. I look at it as you got to find somewhere where people are and get into the conversation, and then you need to find a way to bring it back to something you control. And for me, the most efficient way for me to enter a room full of people to talk to about is YouTube. That's where I grew the fastest. And the thing I can control is my email list, in the sense that I can control the delivery of emails in the order, all that kind of thing. And people are just more likely to buy statistically. So the big difference is, so I've got 70 or just shy of 70,000 subscribers on YouTube, and I've got about 13,000 email subscribers. I launched the course, and half an hour later, I sent out I basically went to ConvertKit, and I sent out 13,000 emails. Obviously I typed it up once, I hit it. So I sent out an email to 13,000 people, and people just started buying almost straight away. So the way I see it, it's conceptually, you got to get in front of people, but then you got to get them back somewhere where it's just you and them. And that's the email list. You could say a website or a blog, but people have to go back to the website or the blog with an email. It lands in their lap because everyone checks their email.
Yeah, because that's one thing I've noticed in the numbers just recently with my course. The bulk of people who are visiting my website is coming to check out the store is coming from the US, but because my email list that's something I got to actually dig into over the coming up in a couple of months. I've got some time set aside to dig into that. That's just people finding it direct. So that's not people who are being prompted or called, where you've got that relationship with them one-to-one. Sorry, I just headbutt my microphone. All that Muay Thai you're talking about. Yeah, so that's a really interesting point, man. The email list obviously has a huge value than people just sort of maybe finding you on YouTube, because of the fact that they've subscribed to your email newsletter is they've showed a commitment to the information or an appreciation to the information or value or content that you're producing.
Yeah, well, one thing I try to do, and I've done this in a few email lists I do, but obviously the primary thing I do is I try to give away something for free in exchange for the email sign up, and then I'll set up a bunch of emails that'll just automatically send out, and everyone is just me trying to give something to the person. Usually it's knowledge or tutorials, but sometimes I'll sneak in bonus downloads that I just don't mention, trying to set an expectation and surpass it. So that way they become really happy and they're a positive association with the list, so that when I go, hey, I've got this product, they have a positive association with it. So they're like, oh, I'll check it out. And at the same time, there's no pressure. They don't have to buy. They stick to the list. You just keep sending them good information. All you're doing is building a rapport with that person because you're being very giving. But, it's a profitable form of giving too, because it's win-win. So I think that's why it works so well.
Do you have a free trial with your course?
No, I have 6 free lessons. So the introductory section you can watch for free. And then I got the first 3 lessons in the getting started are free, so people can check that out. That's the cool thing about a lot of these course platforms, pay specifically, is that when you go to watch a free lesson, you actually have to sign up. You don't have to put any payment details, but you sign up. So you can't just view them randomly. You do have to sign up. So there's a tiny barrier which they have to step over, I guess, which isn't a bad thing. Because, you don't want to just give this stuff away for free and make it so easy for people just to bounce out. So
yeah, because I think that's the biggest thing. People like, I really stress that when I have like my free part of my course. It's like this is obligation free. There's no credit card. Like there's no sneaky tricks here. Like you put your email list in. Or your email, sorry, and you'll probably get an email at some point, but you can unsubscribe from that. There's no, it's obligation free.
I think you got to respect people. That's a big thing about, one thing that I have trouble, I was talking to someone about this the other day, and this is going to sound political. I don't mean it to, but it's something worth thinking about. I think if you're going to do an online course or any form of business whatsoever, is a lot of people are very disillusioned with, say, capitalism because they see the corruption and everything that goes on. But if you I describe to people, I look at capitalism at the purest form for when I'm doing business, which is I want to compete by being the person who offers the most value. That's how I look at how I compete against the competition. So by respecting the customer and not putting pressure on them, saying, hey, look, this is what I have. It has so much value. It has all this stuff, and you can have it for this amount of money. Otherwise, it's all good. And because, if you were speaking to someone on the street and you said, hey, mate, you want a candy bar? And they said no, you wouldn't follow them down the street and go, how come you're not buying my candy bar? Like, come on, buy a candy bar. Yeah, grabbing them on the shoulder. Turn around. Yeah, it's a Mars bar, mate. Buy it. You love Mars. Well, if you offer it to them and they walk away, it's like, cool. Next time they see you, if you're talking, you're friendly, there's no pressure. You build a rapport with that person, and then they're more likely to eventually buy from you. That's all you're trying to do, is offer value and respect the customer, essentially.
Yeah, it's a thing. Is like you have to get people on side. You have to put some and I think by offering value, like putting some, and also I think the thing is too, man, is like it helps your reputation. If you go, look, if you're constantly just giving away good stuff which people are actually getting use out of, man, that helps. I just can't see how you do not do good work for people and they don't reciprocate at some point down the track. Because it takes time. People aren't going to look at your video and just go, I'm going to buy this guy's course. I'm going to buy everything he's got. Whatever he's got, give it to me. I want it. Like, people take time to get to know you. They probably returned your website 2 or 3 times. They might float in and out of your mailing list, and then they'll buy. Because I've noticed that relationship with things that I've bought over the years with, like, in whatever field. One thing I hate is just getting like daily emails on things. And even if the information is good, I just don't want to be spammed. And I will opt out of people's, that's just me. Maybe that's just a personal preference. I'm not saying that's everyone, but maybe that's something that, if you respect your viewer or your viewer, I guess, or the person engaging with your stuff, like you don't just treat them as just someone you've just got to convert to a sale. Maybe it's a very American thing to do, that always be pushing type of thing. But
I think there's some people in Australia who do it too. That's for sure. But I agree with you, man. I think it's some people get very, I don't know what it is. I think we get some people get an image of what rich, successful business people do, and they're like, oh, I'm going to do this. And then they get so caught up in increasing their earnings that I feel like you got to look at, I want to increase my earnings. And the way I do that is by being so valuable and so no pressure that it works. And it's funny you mentioned the thing about the email list. First, I'll just say one thing is, when I launched my first product around AI, I had several people who bought it. They said, I actually don't really want this, but all the information you've delivered over the years, I just want to support you and just buy this $20 style pack that I'd put together.
You're just such a nice guy, Wade.
I'm amazing. It's like I say to my wife all the time, like, it doesn't get any better than this. No. But yeah, like if you deliver enough value, there are going to be a few people out there who they just want to say thank you, and they'll do that because they understand that everyone is working to make a living, because that's just life these days. Yeah. But in regards to the email, sorry to sort of bounce around a bit.
You're right, man.
I have an autoresponder list, and I try to check it and keep it like up to date in the sense that people aren't going to get just, out of date information. But the first week, I will send 5 emails in the first week, because quite often people who sign up, if they sign up, they're probably going to be pretty fresh and they want more information from me. But the second week, it's like, 2 or 3 emails, and I slowly wither it down to once a month, because if someone's been subscribed to your email for a month, daily emails is so overstimulating that if you go, well, hey, one a week at that point's pretty good. But then they get on with life. It's not their main thing anymore. You send one a month, they're like, oh, yeah, they have that positive association. They're probably more likely to check the one a month. If you send 4 a month at that stage, they might ignore all of them. But one a month is digestible, you know?
Yeah, well, it's that supply and demand thing. I've had people who would send out a monthly newsletter and you'd sit down and read it because you're not just getting spammed with like insights and like, you know, products they're hawking and all that sort of stuff. So
yeah.
Actually, here's what I want to ask you just before we start to sort of bring things home is, do you think there's a value to taking into consideration where your YouTube channel, like where your presence is at in terms of when you launch a course? Because I feel like I kind of put the course first while my YouTube channel was starting out, and it's something that sort of, as the channel grows, then that's sort of going to start to pay off more and more, where you came from the perspective where you had a really big audience, to start with, and then all of a sudden when you're launching things, what do you think about that idea of building an audience versus having assets, and then, you know, how that sort of that relationship might work? What are your thoughts on that?
There's definitely an individual, I would say it becomes down to approaches and preferred approaches, and depending on the channel. So for me to do an AI art course, upfront wouldn't work because it updates too frequently. I'm going to update areas of this course because every couple of months there's major updates to these platforms, and I'll have to change a number of videos every few months. But so waiting to do that, where I have an audience where it's now ticking over pretty regularly, like all my products that are related to that, they keep selling because I have a big audience, and therefore the big audience compounds and attracts more people to the audience. And it's then worth my time to update that now. But if I'd done that up front, it wouldn't work. However, I think there's validity, or there's a good, solid strategy to having a course first and then building an audience if you don't have to do that. So, I mean, the guitar isn't really changing, is it? So, like, to use your example, you could do it later, and that would be cool because you'd have a launch and make a lot of money. But if you have it first, then you can just focus on the promotion once it's built and build it up from there. So I think I don't think there's a right or a wrong time. However, I think it depends on how you'd like to operate, because if you build up a content creation schedule and then you can't fit the time in to build a course, having a course already there is going to be probably better for you, because then once you get some money together, and you build up that business, maybe you can hire some help or whatever. But yeah, it really depends. I think you've got to look at your situation and what you're doing.
Did you take time off of YouTube to put your course together, or you tried to maintain a schedule while you did it?
I did try to maintain a schedule. I can give you the idea of the process, right? I looked at my whole course. I planned it all out, what I was going to teach. And I looked at first the most, it's a word I'm looking for, most evergreen lessons. So for AI, it was how to structure your prompt. That's not really going to change a ton over the years. And then I looked at the quicker or simpler tools that are most likely to not change. And I just chipped away. I kept a schedule, but I did 1 or 2 very short videos a week. They were easy to do, quick to do, or were evergreen. I chipped away at them over a period of time. And then when I started getting to the more time-sensitive videos, I went from doing 2 or 3 videos a week down to 1. And I will admit they are lower effort videos. So I had ideas clocked up for what I call lower effort videos, because I could just sit down on a Thursday or something and just pump out a video and release it on Friday. So I went to 1 video a week, down from 3, to try and keep some consistency, to keep my audience engaged. But there was a couple of times there I thought, if I don't get one out this week, that'll be fine. But I ended up having an idea land in my lap, or an update, which was something that was quick and easy to cover, that I did. So yeah, it was a massive shift in priorities.
Do you think there's any harm to taking time off of YouTube to work on a course, or you think it's important to maintain?
I would say if you take some time off, spend a couple of weeks regenerating some buzz, and then launch is probably, like, I've never really thought about that before, but with the discussion we've just had and the fact that you were asking that question, based on, because my views did go down a little bit, but then they kept a foundational level. Like I was still getting at least 5,000-6,000 views a day, like pretty regularly. So, but I was running a bit higher than that. But I would say that if I had to stop completely, things would slowly shrink up. I would say, cool, for the next month, I'm going to pump out videos to build up the view again and then make my announcement, because the first video you publish is not necessarily going to perform as strongly as, a couple of weeks down the line. That's how I would look at it, which can be an issue if you have to update your course in that time, because that creates more work. But I mean, you would have had to do that anyway after you launched if you want to keep it up to date. But in regards to evergreen courses like yours, I would probably build the course, have it there. And now that I think about it, rebuild and then announce it. You could put it on your store and make it part of your funnel still, but actually just publish the announcement of the course a few weeks later after you've built it up.
Because I struggle with that sort of dance at the moment, where I'll sit down, I'll try and pump out a few videos, which will buy me like even just that 1 a week schedule, and then that buys me like a week and a half before I have to get back into my YouTube schedule again, just to sort of pump out the videos. And I'm sort of weighing up whether I'd just be better just getting my brain into it and pushing it out in a month, trying to finish this thing in a month. And then you've got no distractions. You've got your two courses, and you can just focus purely on just putting content together with that, maybe.
Oh yeah, so kind of like front loading up some videos to open up that time.
Well, I think that's the thing. I try and do that, but it's one of those things where I'm at the point where I'm like, maybe I would get the course done quicker if I just dropped into it and just go, I'm smashing this out. I'm finishing it off in a month. I'm just doing this for the next month. I'm going to finish this course.
I think I personally, I think that you, like, if it's tough for you to actually make that space, then I reckon just do that. Like, at the end of the day, if you want to create a course, to sell, if that's like a goal of yours and you're struggling to do it, even if you're trying to front load because you just don't have the time, like nothing will get you making that course than just going, well, I'll just make it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, whatever you have to do to make it, if it's a goal of yours, I guess, you have to, like...
Well, the thing is with the content I do on YouTube, it's not like a straight up and down. Like, talking videos are great because you can sit there and just impart information. But whenever you're talking about anything that's tutorial based, there's extra sound you've got to record and produce. There's extra camera angles you've got to produce. There's extra add-ons and downloads you've got to produce. And if you're a one-man team, like, it's just, there's a lot more things to do in creating content. Like with you can sit there with your camera and literally screen capture and you're sweet. Do you know what I mean?
My videos are very quick.
Just got your microphone. Like, there's not, like, the level of mixing and all that just isn't there. So that's the sort of thing where there's a lot more friction, or just more things to do when you're doing something which is not only audiovisual, has components of that, but also the sound component, which you want to, I don't know, that just with my background, with working in those areas, I can't just, you got to get that nice.
Well, every video is different. Mine are quick and easy to pump out because of the nature of them, but I have to then do more. But I mean, man, Mr. Beast is rich and has a team, and he doesn't produce a video a week. That just goes to show, I mean, obviously it's hard to compare to him because he's an outlier. He's an exception to the rule because he's so big compared to most people. But it just goes to show you that even he can't produce so I think we're all human, and like, if every channel is individual. If yours takes more work, then you just have to do what you have to do. Yeah. And one final thing I will say, there was a guy I used to follow years ago called it was called Lazy Ass Stoner, but he was actually a business guy. And he was it was more the personality that he carried was the lazy ass stoner, but he was offering online business tutorials and advice on blogging and all that kind of stuff. One day he just stopped making videos. And I remember thinking, like, what happened to this dude? And it was like years and years and years. And then all of a sudden he just published this video out of the blue. And man, the amount of views it got was insane. So, it's not like, I don't feel like your channel dies and YouTube goes, no. I think when you come back out, they're like, this was a successful channel. So there's a degree of, I would try and build my audience back up, like I said earlier, but it's not going to die down if you're, you know what I mean? Like there's...
Yeah. Because I've noticed, man, with when I've front loaded things, I'm almost rushing because I'm like, all right, I've bought myself 2 weeks here. I got to push. And like, because I'm like, all right, I've got 2 weeks to get as much of this course done as possible. But I know I work better when I've got just clear air to just really dive into something and not just constantly because that's in the back of my mind when I'm doing that. I'm thinking about, okay, I got to get, what's my next video going to be? Type of thing on like, got to keep a YouTube schedule going. So, because that's the thing, like I guess that's the thing. Like I've answered a few questions for myself here, man, I think. So
that's good. Sometimes asking the question does it. I will say one thing before we wrap up too.
Yeah, man.
If having a course makes your business profitable, if you take time off to make that course, but your views drop, every view after that is worth more if it leads to course sales. If so many views, if every, say, 10,000 views or 1,000 views or whatever it is leads to a course sale, then every view becomes more profitable because you took the time off to make that course. So the way I see it, taking the time off is probably a profitable choice, even if you come back with less views.
I think long term, because the thing is, it's having an asset there, which, you know, whether it's now or it's going to sort of, you know, bring more value to the table down the track, just having those assets there are important to what you do, particularly if they're fun, like, because with the tutoring side of things or the teaching side of things or coaching side of things, whatever you want to call it, like I've been doing that I'm doing less and less of it these days, but I know what works from those perspectives. And because of just what I do, I know what works, how to get certain results. So the information of the processes only become more refined. So they're not, like you said, they're evergreen topics. So yeah, interesting. All right, dude. So if we wrap this one up, that's been a good chat, man, about that. So I got a lot of good things out of this one today.
Yeah, me too, actually.
Hopefully the viewers or the listeners will do so as well. So Wade, where can the good people find you, man, if they want to get a hold of you?
Search creatorimpact.com. You can search for Creator Impact on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I'm just going to call it Twitter now. I know I say this every time, but X it's just not working for me. Sorry, Elon.
It doesn't roll off the tongue.
So Twitter, yeah. Or you can search for my name, Wade McMaster. Both will work. What about you? Where can they find you?
You can find my YouTube channel at HPM Guitar. And I have an Instagram account that I'm just called Ryan Wyatt Guitar. So you can jump on that. I will be getting into posting more content on that coming up. But yeah, that's where you can get a hold of me through those avenues. And the website obviously is hpmguitar.com. So actually, where's the best if people want to interact with the channel? Is that just through YouTube, or we need to start an email or something?
Well, that's a good point. If you go to creatorimpact.com, there's a contact form there if you want to send me an email. Otherwise, yeah.
I just mean for the podcast.
Oh, the podcast.
We need to set up. Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, we'll pop something in the description below because this podcast is pretty fresh. There's a few things we haven't set up yet, but by the time we publish this one, I'll make sure we got something. Even if it's just a Google form to start with, we'll get some kind of setup there. Awesome. I'm a web designer. I need to get off my rear end and do something about that, I think.
Nah, it's all good, man. All right, this one's been fun. Let's wrap it up, and we'll catch you lovely people, wonderful people, in the next one.
Yeah.
Catch us later.
See you later, guys.